For centuries, Jesus has been seen as a figure who belongs only to Christianity. He has been framed within religious doctrines, worshipped in specific ways, and used as the foundation of churches and institutions. But Jesus does not belong to any one religion. His existence is not limited to theological dogma. His life was never meant to be confined within human-made traditions or institutions. Jesus is much greater than any single faith. He is a universal force, a living presence of divine love, and an embodiment of spiritual truth that goes beyond the structures people have built around him. Many people only see Jesus through a religious lens, as though he exists only for those who follow Christianity. But this way of thinking limits his true presence. Jesus never intended to create a hierarchy that divided people into believers and non-believers. He did not come to establish a church. He came to show a higher way of being, a way of living that is guided by love, not fear. He came to demonstrate what happens when a person completely aligns with love, when fear is overcome, and when the illusion of separation disappears. He did not come to be worshipped. He came to be followed. The idea that Jesus belongs to a single religious tradition is a human creation. No one owns Jesus. Just as no one owns the sun, the wind, or the ocean, no one owns the presence of Christ. His teachings and his essence are for all people, regardless of background, belief, or culture. He is not a figure that must be accepted or rejected based on religious affiliation. He is a presence, a consciousness, a way of being that is open to anyone who seeks to know love in its purest form. In the Course in Miracles, Jesus is described as an elder brother, someone who walked the earth and fully awakened to the truth of love. He did not possess anything that others lack. He simply surrendered to love completely, without resistance, without fear, and without interference from the ego. The difference between Jesus and the rest of humanity is not that he was made of something different, but that he let go of everything that was not real. He let go of judgment, attachment, limitation, and grievance. He allowed himself to be nothing but love. This is why his presence was not meant to be idolized. It was meant to be a reminder of what is possible for every person. His message was never worship me. It was always follow me. Not in a superficial way, not by simply attending church services or repeating religious phrases, but by embodying the consciousness he demonstrated. To follow Jesus is to commit to thinking as he thought, loving as he loved, and forgiving as he forgave. It is choosing love over fear in every moment, letting go of anything that stands in the way of compassion, and fully surrendering to the divine presence that is within us all. Religious institutions have often placed Jesus on such a high pedestal that his example seems impossible to reach. They have made him seem so far above humanity that people feel they could never live as he did. But the truth is that Jesus came to show not his own greatness, but the greatness within all people. He was not an exception. He was an example. He came to show what happens when divine consciousness is fully expressed through a human form. When we stop seeing Jesus as only a religious figure and start understanding him as a universal force, we free ourselves from the limits of doctrine. His teachings were never about power structures or religious superiority. They were about love, healing, and awakening. And his message was never about exclusion. It was about inclusion. He never turned people away based on their status, their sins, or their background. He looked at every person and saw their divine truth. He saw beyond guilt, beyond mistakes, beyond the conditioning of the world, and he recognized only love. This kind of recognition is not just an act of kindness. It is an act of power. To see with the eyes of Christ is to dissolve illusion. To look at another person and see only love, even when they themselves have forgotten it, is an act of healing. This is the true miracle, the ability to see the world not as the ego sees it, but as Jesus saw it, without judgment, without fear, without separation. The resurrection is more than just a historical event. It is a transformation that happens within human consciousness. Every time a person chooses love instead of fear, chooses to forgive instead of condemn, chooses to see unity instead of division, that is a resurrection. It is the rising of the Christ within. It is the awakening to the reality that love is the only truth. In the Course in Miracles, Jesus speaks about the resurrection as a state of mind. It is not about what happened to his physical body after death. It is about what happens within each of us when we align with love. The resurrection is not about believing in a religious event. It is about experiencing a shift in perception, a moment when we let go of fear and embrace the love that has always been present. Jesus, as a universal force, does not require belief. He does not need acknowledgement to be real. His presence is not dependent on human perception. He is simply here, available to all who are willing to open their hearts. He does not ask for rituals. He does not demand obedience. He does not require conditions. He is a guide, a reminder, a light in the darkness, showing the way not through control, but through the pure radiance of love. To embrace Jesus in this way is to strip away the layers of distortion that have been placed upon him. It is to move beyond dogma, beyond exclusivity, beyond religious identity, and into the essence of what he truly represents. It is to understand that Christ is not a person to be accepted or rejected, but a state of being to be realized. Reclaiming Jesus is not just about historical truth. It is about spiritual awakening. It is about recognizing that his presence is alive within every person who chooses to align with love. It is about dissolving the barriers that have been placed around him and allowing his message to be what it was always meant to be, an invitation to return to the truth of who we are. This is why his presence is so powerful, even beyond the confines of religion. People who have never considered themselves Christian still feel his presence. They still experience his love. They still hear his voice in moments of darkness, guiding them toward the light. Because his presence is not about a label, not about a set of rules, not about a belief system. It is about the universal truth of love itself, a truth that transcends every human boundary. To recognize Jesus as a universal force is to recognize that love has no limits. It does not belong to one group or another. It does not require permission. It does not conform to human structures. It simply is. It is here, now, available, waiting for nothing except the willingness to receive it. This is the deeper understanding of Christ. Not as a religious icon, but as a living presence, as a force that moves through the world, through the hearts of all who choose to remember. To embrace this understanding is to step into a greater reality, one in which love is the foundation of all things, where fear holds no power, where the divine is not separate from humanity but fully present within it. In the Course in Miracles, Jesus teaches that we are all capable of awakening to the truth of love, just as he did. He does not see himself as separate from us. He does not see himself as superior. He sees himself as a brother, one who has simply remembered the truth that we have forgotten. The call is not to worship but to embody. The invitation is not to bow but to rise. The path is not to look outside for salvation, but to recognize that salvation is already within. This is the truth that Jesus came to reveal. Not that he was the only Son of God, but that we all are. Not that he alone was divine, but that divinity lives within us all. To reclaim Jesus is to reclaim ourselves. And to remember who he is to remember who we are. And to live as he lived, to love as he loved, is to fulfill the purpose for which we were created. Love is all there is. The rest is illusion. And when we finally awaken to this truth, we will see that the Christ was never outside of us, never apart, but always here, waiting to be remembered.